Have you ever stopped to think about how things bend? I mean, really think about it. It's this hidden science that, quite literally, holds our entire world together. Today, we're cracking the code on how engineers predict this with incredible precision, and you'll see it's the key to pretty much every piece of modern tech we use.
So here's a riddle for you. What do an airplane wing, a skyscraper, and a tiny little microchip all have in common? It sounds like a strange mix, right? Well, the one thing that connects them all is that they bend under stress. And our ability to predict exactly how they'll bend, well, that's the only thing standing between an amazing breakthrough and a total disaster.
In the engineering world, they call this beam deflection. It sounds super technical, but it's a pretty simple idea. You push on something and it moves. The real trick, though, the multi-billion-dollar question, is figuring out precisely how much it's going to move. And that turns out to be one of the biggest challenges in all of engineering.
And we're not just talking about bridges and buildings here. This is a truly universal problem. You're asking the same fundamental question whether you're designing a massive structure that touches the sky or a component so small you need a microscope to see it. When we put it under pressure, how is it going to react?
Because here's the thing. Everything bends. There's no such thing as a perfectly rigid object. And figuring out that tiny amount of deflection isn't just some academic exercise. It is absolutely essential for keeping our buildings safe, our machines running, and for pushing technology to places we never thought it could go.
Okay, so if the idea is so simple, why do we call it a puzzle? Well, it's because the real world is messy. The nice, clean equations you learned in a physics textbook, they're a great start, but when you try to apply them to an actual real-world object, things get complicated fast.
I mean, just look at what engineers are up against. Materials don't always behave the way you expect. Extreme heat or cold can completely change their properties. And we're not building simple blocks anymore. We're using these incredible composite materials with really wild shapes. Throw in some vibrations and other dynamic forces, and all of a sudden, your simple textbook math just doesn't cut it.
You know, this quote just nails it perfectly. The real world doesn't fit into a neat little box. That gap between the perfect formula and the messy reality, that's where the real engineering happens. So if the old tools don't work, what do?
And that is the big question, right? How do you solve problems that are just too complex for a standard formula? Well, the answer isn't about finding a better pen and paper. It's about opening up a completely different kind of toolbox. We crack the code with something called numerical methods. Basically, instead of trying to find one single perfect equation to solve the whole thing, we use the massive power of computers to build a solution piece by tiny piece, getting unbelievably close to the real answer. And this digital toolbox is just amazing. The undisputed heavyweight champion is finite element analysis, or FEA. Just imagine building a bridge out of millions of digital Legos. The computer solves the simple physics for each tiny little brick and then adds it all together to see how the whole complex bridge behaves. It's genius. But that's not the only tool. You've got things like the Galerkin method, which is like finding the perfect best fit line through a bunch of messy data points. Or, and this is really cool, computational optimization, where you basically tell a computer to try out thousands of different designs to find the absolute best one.
And the workflow itself makes a lot of sense. First, you build a digital twin, a perfect 3D model of your object. Then you throw everything you can at it, heat, pressure, vibrations, you name it. Then you let the computer just crunch the numbers. But you know, the most crucial step, the one that comes up over and over in all the research, is this last one, validation. You always have to check your digital results against real-world tests to make sure your simulation is telling the truth.
And what's wild is that this toolbox is getting bigger and more powerful every single day. We're now seeing things like AI and deep learning getting integrated to predict how materials will behave in ways we've never even seen before. Scientists are even using super specialized math like fractional calculus for materials that have weird memory-like properties. The point is, this field is just exploding with creativity.
And look, this isn't some far-off sci-fi concept. This is happening right now, in the real world. All of this mind-blowing computational work is done on powerful software platforms like Ansys, Abacus, and MATLAB. These are the tools that are building our future.
So, what's the big payoff here? Why does spending all this time and energy cracking the code of bending matter so much? Well, because it completely changes the game. It changes how we invent and how we build, well, everything.
The difference is just night and day. Think about the old way. It was all trial and error. You'd over-engineer things just to be safe, build tons of expensive physical models, and then just hope you found all the weak spots. But now it's a world of precision simulation. We can create perfectly optimized, efficient designs and test them digitally thousands of times. We can predict and prevent failure before a single piece of metal has even been cut.
And you can see the benefits everywhere. We can build much safer structures because we can simulate how a tiny, invisible crack might grow over decades. We can design mind-bending new tech like metasurfaces that can bend light in impossible ways. And we can create incredibly efficient shapes and materials for literally everything around us.
So just how good are we getting at this? Well, the research shows that it's now common for these simulations to have over 99% correlation with real-world experiments. Think about that for a second. That is a total game changer. We've gone from making educated guesses to having what is essentially a digital crystal ball.
Which kind of leaves us with one last really big thought. As these tools get even better, even more accurate, if we can perfectly predict every single bend, every stress, and every potential break before it happens, what are the limits? What kind of new worlds, new materials, and new technologies can we finally build? Something to think about.